provide training documents to a model and then save that copy of the model.
The model fine-tuned for judges, right? And then that changed the perspective.
Another scenario where fine-tuning is effective is reducing cost and or latency speed.
You are using a model through an API and you want it to perform consistently. Fine-tuning is your friend because that didn't change when the new model got updated.
What's going on, everybody? Today is August 27, 2024. You're listening and hopefully watching the Daily AI Show live. And today we're going to be talking about when does it make sense to fine-tune the GPT-4.0 or 4.0 Mini model. And with us today, we have Jyunmi and Andy, Beth. Now, Brian, I don't know why I put ands in between them, but that's who we have today. We'll see if anybody else comes in the door. And I am in a pretty good mood today. And I shared with the team beforehand why, but something really, truly made me laugh in prepping for this show. So make sure you stay tuned to hear some pretty funny stuff that came out of the fine-tuning examples that we were doing in prep for the show, or what I was doing in prep for the show. So glad you guys are here. And, look, this is almost, I won't say it's a two-parter, but today's show and Thursday's show kind of are a good bookend. And let me tell you why, because today we're going to be talking about fine-tuning. On Thursday, we're going to be talking about RAG prompting. So, and although it's not really about one is one better than the other, if you're interested in this, if you're interested in we'll talk a little bit about that from OpenAI's standpoint on this. When does one make sense over the other? If you're listening to today's show and you listen to Thursday's show, you're going to have a really good understanding. Not only are we going to show you today how to fine-tune a model, it is crazy simple to do, and OpenAI is giving you free credits to go do it, so you don't even have to pay anything for the next several weeks, up to a limit, I should say. And then on Thursday, if you're interested in learning how to maybe use a RAG system or having a database that you want to pull questions from, let's say you have a huge HR knowledge document, and you're like, hey, I need it to tell me this HR stuff every single time without fail. Do not get creative with it. And you want to learn better how to do the prompting for that and what that would entail. Well, we'll touch base on that on Thursday. So just wanted to put that out there. If you're listening to our show, make sure you're coming back on Thursday, the 29th, to hear more on the RAG side. But today we're going to focus on fine tuning. And this is going to be a bit of a show and tell type show from my side. I'm not sure what you guys have. As I get this sort of pulled up on my screen, what was as you prepped for today's show, what was sort of your maybe initial thoughts, just general overall, before we dive into the weeds here? Andy, let me start with you.
Sure. So fine-tuning is specifically the opportunity to provide training documents to a model and then save that copy of the model with its revised weights in the OpenAI platform. So it's going to be inside platform. So you're using APIs. This is not something you can play with it, and you can even accomplish similar things in Playground without ever saving a new instance of your model. So you can test it in advance. But once you're ready to apply a fine-tuned model to an application, what you're really doing is you're saving a copy of the whole model with your adjusted weights based on providing it a wide range of examples in a specific format that allows that model to be weight adjusted and then saved under whatever name you assign to it.
Yeah, and I was going to say, Andy, maybe do you want to expand really quick on how, with open source models, there's some basic ways. I'm going to show you a basic way that anybody can play with this today, assuming you have a paid account with OpenAI and ChatGPT. But what are we up to? Tens of thousands. I don't know how many models are out there that are essentially combos. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and really how that essentially is fine tuning? That's how we're using those models to accomplish maybe more niche tasks.
Yeah, well, OpenAI tuning the GPT-4.0 class of models, even the Mini one, which is a less expensive and more compact version of GPT-4.0, that's newly available to anyone who has access to the API for OpenAI. But all before that, if you were reasonably proficient with coding, you could take any open source model and tune it. But the pipeline for doing that requires that you be a lot more technically sophisticated than what OpenAI has now made available to you. But you have a choice of not just GPT-4.0 or GPT-4.0 Mini or a number of others under OpenAI, but you have a wide range of models that have unique characteristics that may be more suited to what you want to do with a fine-tuned model, which you're going to build into some kind of application workflow.
Yeah. Beth, you want to add on to that? I mean, I know you certainly, use different models. I'm not sure which ones you use for which, but, we've definitely seen models be sort of purpose built, right? And the idea that in some future, we might be looking at some situation where to the end user, to us, we may not see any difference from the time we enter our prompt to the time we get a result. To us, it may look instantaneous, kind of the way it does right now with ChatGPT. What could be happening on the back end is a very sophisticated either algorithm or system that's picking based on your prompt to maybe go to 6 or 7 different fine-tuned variations that might be more towards what's the one for Wolfram or something like that? You always said, you've told me about it. We used to use a plugin.
Yep, it is Wolfram.
Wolfram, I got it right. Yeah. So would that be a good example of sort of like, could that be an example, I guess, of fine-tuning? The plugin wasn't, but is that an example of how you could potentially fine-tune a model to be more specific that would be healthcare, right? Medical?
No, and Wolfram is actually math, so I love where you're going, but I actually don't think Wolfram is a great example because large language models don't do math particularly well unless they use their coding abilities, right? So I suspect Wolfram had like a little do this with code as opposed to try to fine tune the model for all the mathematical permutations that could result in a correct answer. Like there are better ways to do it. Yeah. But yes, healthcare is a great example of when you would fine tune. And I'm just going to give a shout out to the previous episode. If you watch the structured prompting in Google's AI Studio, that was actually the beginning of a fine tune. We were just doing structured prompting and like giving more examples to see like when it was at the point where it was going to follow the pattern. That's essentially what you're doing with a fine tune. It's just when in a fine tune, you're going to save that file. The other thing is that for the most part, we are going to talk about fine tuning large language models with text. But and we're going to talk about that because OpenAI said you can do it now with 4.0 and 4.0 Mini through September 23rd for 1 million tokens. And that's a big deal. These are great models. With Gemini, you can do it with Flash for free also. And there is no deadline, but you can do it with audio. Gemini is like a native multimedia model. So you could fine tune with audio going into Gemini. We're not going to talk a ton more about that today, but just like, so you know where this is going.
Let me tie that comment.
I'm curious if you can get an example on that too.
Sorry. I'd add back quickly to the comment that you made, Brian, which was, hey, there's open source models out there, and you could use open source models and fine tune those. But the major open source models like Llama from Meta and Mistral are not multimodal. So what you're pointing out, Beth, is very important. The new availability of fine-tuning GPT-4.0 and 4.0 Mini gives you access to models that can do a wide range of things with audio and video included as part of the inputs. So if you're trying to tune a model to do something in an application workflow that is specific to understanding images or doing image analysis / object detection within the images, you would want to use OpenAI because of the multimodal, or Gemini, which is also multimodal.
OpenAI has that ability, but they have not opened it up for their fine-tune. You cannot fine-tune in audio. I'm not sure you can fine-tune with Gemini and video. I know you can do it with audio. You may be able to do it with video also. The other big difference in this context is that 4.0 has 128,000 context window, and Gemini Flash has a 1 million token context window, which is why we could conceivably fine-tune based on multi-hour audio. As with all of these things, like once you start to get to the large numbers, you're giving up a little bit of accuracy or oomph for those sorts of things. But I'm mentioning that really just so that you can see where we're going, right? Like we're definitely fine-tuning audio, video, what you're seeing out your window, right? Like the pictures that you take on your window, or whatever those things are. Those are coming because those are just another kind of language. And what we're talking about is teaching the LLM a more specific language to you, or this task that you do.
Yeah.
Brian, before you go to your example, I want to just make a distinction between the context window and the result of a fine-tuning of a model, which doesn't need a large context window once it's tuned. So that's one of the things that you're achieving in why you might choose to fine-tune a model, is that now you can use a smaller model with a smaller context window, less expensive, less burdensome in terms of token infusion, because it's already been trained on tons of examples and the weights are there to interpret whatever you're going to put into the model.
Yeah, it's a good call out. In fact, that's kind of right where we're going to go into this. And before I do, I just want to bring up, we have such great people on our comments on YouTube and LinkedIn, mostly YouTube. But Jude says, it's over my head right now, but I want to learn more. Jude, I got you, because that's exactly what we're going to do right now. We're going to learn more. So let's start with a little bit of, there it goes. This is the blog. It's called Fine Tuning, now available with GPT-4.0. And this is from OpenAI. You can go direct. You could Google search this or Perplexity search this very quickly and find this. And it talks about we're launching, and as Beth said, we're offering 1 million training tokens per day for free for every organization through September 23rd. It gives us a little bit of getting started. Right here, it says you can visit our docs. We're about to go look at that in a second. I don't know, you can't really see my mouse moving around, but about halfway down your screen, it says fine tuning with docs. We'll look at that. Then they go in to talk about, in this particular blog, where they've seen success with it. They've worked with companies, they've used the SW benchmark. And basically what they're saying is, with a verified, benchmarking and leaderboard, they're basically showing how some companies like Cosign's Genie have been able to get superior results, 40, 50, 70, sometimes near 100% better results after fine tuning. So you go, that sounds pretty amazing. So what does that mean? Does that mean that, ChatGPT is great, but I have some specific ways that I want ChatGPT to respond or interact with me? Is that a reason to maybe go to fine tuning? Well, maybe, yes or no, right? It might. So they give you some more examples here, but what we're going to do is we're actually going to bounce over to this tab instead. And so this is the document one, the link it just showed, and it talks to us. It tells us which models. By the way, this is once you do this, you're in basically the platform, which we're going to talk about a little bit more here. But this is what I think is worth sharing right here in the middle of the screen. When to use fine tuning. Now, this is directly from OpenAI. I don't want to read all this, but we do recommend first attempting to get good results with prompt engineering, prompt chaining, which is when you we talked about that a lot, breaking complex tasks into multiple prompts. An example would be, do some research on this company for sales. I'm a sales rep. Do some research on this company. Based on that research, this is my second prompt. Based on that research, tell me the 5 main pain points they're experiencing. Based on those 5 main pain points, you see what I'm saying? That's a prompt chain, right? So that's moving through, and we're using multiple prompts. So it's talking about that. And function calling, with the key reasons being, and it says there are many tasks at which our models may not initially appear to perform well, but results can be improved with the right prompts. Cannot agree with that more than they stated right there. That's very, very important, that more than likely you can get much better results by just improving your prompting, prompt chaining, function calling, these kind of things. Iterating over prompts and other tasks has a much faster feedback loop, 1,000%. It's going to be much easier to just be inside the ChatGPT window and iterate right there and try different prompts, or just go back up to your original prompt and hit the little pencil icon and edit it. So you could do that. It says in cases where fine-tuning is still necessary, initial prompt engineering work is not wasted. We typically see the best results when using a good prompt in the fine-tuning data, or combining prompt chaining to tool use with fine-tuning. So they're even saying hey, you're not even going to waste your time. If you iterate and iterate and iterate and you get as close as you possibly think you can get with those combinations of good prompt engineering, prompt chaining, function calling, and you still feel like there's more I can get here, but this is now gone from a 70% effectiveness to a 90% effectiveness, but you're saying, hey, I want 98. That might be a case for where you might want to try fine tuning, but there's a cost associated to it. It's not particularly fast. And if you update models, you may find out that you need to retrain the entire data set. Because Andy said, you're embedding this information into the data set. So now, or to the model rather. So now, if you, let's say GPT-5.0 comes out next week and you've spent a lot of time fine tuning 4.0 Mini, well, it may work for you, but now you're saying, geez, I don't know, is 5.0 going to work right out of the box? Is it better than my fine tuning if I've got this really good prompt engineering? Case in point, why the prompt engineering and better prompts is going to fail you or not serve you a good purpose? Because, hey, if I've done all that pre-work, guess what? New model comes out next week. Good prompting should work really well on that new model. Fine tuning, well, you may find out that you maybe invested some money that wasn't necessary that a new model, and you're going to have to refine tune that new model. So it says common use cases for where fine tuning can improve. Go ahead, Beth.
So let's just talk about that because that's also a reason to fine tune. Like there are instances where you'd look at that and say a better model is going to come out, and so I'm going to want to redo my process. But if you are using a model through an API and you want it to perform consistently, fine tuning is your friend because that didn't change when the new model got updated, right? Like,
sure.
Isn't that true? It stays in that state. So depending on how you're using this stuff in your business, if you want consistency and you're willing for the model to not be the like latest and greatest because you're going to go and build something else on top of that, fine tuning can actually be like a way to maintain consistency.
And this is
let me add something there, which is this is all part of a methodology where using examples, and that's what you're going to tune. You're going to fine tune using examples, a prompt and a response, and you give it a bunch of those examples. In fact, OpenAI suggests minimum 50. Give it 50 examples, and what you can do with that is you can take a much smaller model that's basically fixed out there, even something like GPT 3.5 Turbo, and it's been demonstrated over and over again. If you give one of these much less capable non-frontier models now lots of examples, they perform at or near the same level as those comprehensive frontier models can. So you're basically, avoiding obsolescence by doing a good job tuning one of the models that will work sufficiently in your application.
Right. And that is part of why that's part of why having a set of data, right? Like we've been talking about the whole time that we've been running the show, your data is your gold, right? And so we've talked about that in terms of business, but your personal data is also your gold, right? Like if you have 50 examples that you can fine tune on something, then that makes things easier. I hope you're going to share the sarcasm, Brian.
I'm about to. And let's dive into that really quick. And I'll kind of run through this sort of fast because I want to leave time for more conversation about this. But let me show you really quickly how we go about this. And the only thing I was going to add to what you guys just said is, because I think it's a valid point, another scenario where fine-tuning is effective is reducing cost and or latency speed by replacing more expensive models like GPT-4.0 with a fine-tuned GPT-4.0 Mini model. You can achieve good results with GPT-4.0. You could often reach similar quality with a fine-tuned GPT-4.0 Mini model by fine-tuning on the 4.0 completions, possibly with a shortened instruction prompt. So a great example there of why this might be something you might want to look into is to reduce costs through your API. You're using a cheaper, smaller model that's now fine-tuned, is more cost-effective than running through prompts through 4.0. And, look, it depends on what a company's doing, but you don't have to be a large company for this to start making a significant impact. Just take one custom GPT type example that your company, if you're in marketing or sales, let's say you have a large company where you have 30 salespeople and you have a proven prompt that speeds them up 5, 6, 7 times a day, or let's even go more than that, before every time they pick up the phone to make a cold call or do cold outreach through email. They're going to use this prompt, right? Let's say that's it. So now multiply that by 30 times per rep times 50. That's a lot of prompting. And if you're able to save just a few cents or a fraction of a cent, you can just do the quick extrapolation there and figure out that this can be very cost effective for a company. However, as you're going to see, like, there's some effort being put into this, and you would definitely still want to start with fine tuning the prompting first to see if you can get those achieved results before you do this. Okay. With all that said, I just want to pull up this screen really quick to give credit where credit is due. Love us some Corbin Brown. He puts out amazing videos. I use this as part of my training for me, to not training the model, but to understand what we need to look at. And I also use this other video by developers. Here it is. I'm sorry. By Elvis Sarabia. Also put out a great video. He has a longer data set that you can train on if you like, and he gives access to that in his. In fact, it's right here. This is a good example. We'll use this really quick. This is his data set that he gives in the comments or in the description. So if you even want to follow through exactly what Elvis has in his video, you can do that. I went a slightly different way because I wanted to use something that was a little bit faster. But what you can see is, like, we don't need to really read this, but this is essentially what we're going to use as our model, our file type. It's called JSON-L. I don't know if you say it that way or it's just JSON-L, but JSON is a common file. It's got an L on the end of it. And so you're going to see something very similar to this. A lot of rows where it repeats itself for the vast majority of the front of it. In this case, he's using it to detect emotion from a text input. And so you can see here, our roll surprise, and then here's what they inputted, and then here's the example of content, or I guess it says maybe fear as well. So it's giving a whole bunch of examples like Andy talked about, and giving what it thinks the sentiment essentially is of that particular thing. Great. So if you want to do this, you can use Elvis's data set and you can go train. I'm going to do it slightly different and use Corbin's side of things, because in this doc tab, there's actually an example format that we can start with. So in this particular case, if we wanted to make a sarcastic chatbot, OpenAI gives us a really good starter way to do it, but they tell you, hey, you need to have at least 10 rows of this. So this gives us 3, and Marv is here it is. Marv, this is basically your input. Marv is a factual chatbot that is also sarcastic. And then if, in this example, what's the capital of France? Marv is going to respond in this fine-tuned Paris, as if everyone doesn't already know that or doesn't know that already. Okay, so just to speed this up, all I did was take these 3 examples, go into ChatGPT and say, hey, I need 50, not 3. Then I started to see the answers and I was like, you know what? When I think of sarcasm, I think about it poking fun back at the user. So I made some quick adjustments and I was like, no, here's an example. And I gave it an example of what I felt like would be more realistic sarcasm, which is poking fun at the user for asking the question, right? And so I trained it a little bit and I got 50 new examples. And then what I did was, following Corbin and other people, but there's documentation on this, you go into, people pretty much know the playground. You also have your dashboard when you log into where you would do your OpenAI, your APIs and your keys. And you quite literally come over here to dashboard, then fine tuning on the left, and then you're going to hit create. And it's pretty easy, right? From the base model, the first thing we're going to do, by the way, you can see my fine tuned ones below. In this particular case, you guys are going to use the 4.0 Mini. You could use the 4.0, but we get the free tokens with, I think, more with Mini. So you want to start there. And then you're going to upload your file. And if you already had it, you could select it existing. If I'd already uploaded, in my case, I've already uploaded before. You don't have to do the validation one. In Elvis's example, he gives you an validation file as well to open, but it's not necessary. You can add a little suffix, which is going to make it easier to find that model. I'll show you that in a second. And you can leave the rest of this on auto. You can do a seed if you want to, but you could also limit the amount of times, like the epochs. If we look at or epochs, I'm going to try to say that. The number of epochs to train the model for. An epoch refers to one full cycle through the training data set, defaults to auto. In my case, because I didn't want it to run a really long time, I just set it at 5 for the Corbin example. Now, what I did. So let's just stop where I am really quick. All I've done is done this training right here. This is it running and succeeding. It started it even gave me a time date, but I took it away. It took about 9 minutes to run with 50 examples. Okay. So not particularly live. And again, remember, I stopped it at 5 run throughs because I wanted to go forever. I didn't leave it on auto. So we did 5. All right. Just tell me if it's epics or epochs. Epochs? Who knows? Beth says yes. Jyunmi says yes.
It's an epoch. Yes.
It's epoch? Epochs. Okay.
Yeah. Epics are stories or narratives.
And that would be EPIC anyway, wouldn't it? Not EPO. Yep, there you go. Answer my little question. Okay, so you can see the file that we ended up saving when I did this. By the way, in Corbin's video, he tells you to use, it is called, oh man, I'll get it. It's a free download of a software that you can write and save these files, but that's all it is, literally. So it trains on this. This is the 50 rows. It gives you some data here, talks about some messages and metrics. Like you can even see here, usage policy evaluates completed. Below it. Evaluating model against our usage policies before enabling. That's really important. If you're trying to do stuff with like adult content or things that are not okay with ChatGPT, it will stop you. It's not going to allow you to train on some fine tuning if it doesn't already fall within the policies. Now, this is just sarcasm. It's just fun. No big deal. Okay, so where does that take us to? Now that that's all done, now guess what? You can just go into the playground and play with it. So you can see here, this is a playground. I still use the playground all the time. And we're going to evaluate GPT-4.0. In fact, that really should have been Mini, but I did do that. So this is 4.0. And then here's my sarcasm one on the right. So we're comparing and contrasting, but honestly, now that I think about that, should have been 4.0 Mini on the left, but okay. So you put in the system prompt, which was Marv is a factual chatbot that is sarcastic. That's what it was trained on, so we want to use that same system prompt. And you can see left to right here, I'm not going to go through all these, but I'm going to share a few at the end. What's the capital of the UK? It answers on both. On the 4.0 without it being fine-tuned. Oh, that's a tough one. Let me think. Oh, right, it's London. Only one of the most famous cities in the world, right? That's sarcasm, but it's not sarcasm pointed at me. On the trained model, London, it's a city you might have seen on a map once. Now it's pointed at me, right? It's more sarcastic pointed at the user. Can I drive to Cuba from Florida? Sure, if your car can double as a submarine. Cuba's an island, so on and so forth. On the fine-tune, sure. Just take a little detour through the ocean, right? So you can see that I didn't show you guys all the fine tuning, but this is more in line with my trained data set. So then I said, well, let me push a little bit more. I need to know the difference between a RAG system and a fine tuning model because I wanted to see it. Does it apply sarcasm to more than just short questions like what's the capital of Portugal, right? Because that's kind of what the training set was on. I was like, will it go beyond that? It will. So it talks about a RAG system. This is on the fine-tuned. A RAG is more for more accurate responses, while fine-tuning a model is like giving a pet extra training. One improves performance, the other just makes you feel better about your choices, right? So it's just kind of taking a dig at me for asking this question. So on and on and
right.
on.
So just to like shout out in terms of the larger models versus the smaller models, that's something that we've seen in prompting as well. So fine-tuning, essentially what you're doing with fine-tuning at the beginning of it is a few shot. It's just like not a few shot, it's a many shot. I don't know, many shot is a thing, but
50 shots, 50 shot.
And that works better with the Sonnet, the Mini, that works better in that level of model and smaller. And we think that may be because it's actually not being given as much training about reasoning. I don't want you to reason. I want you to find the pattern in what I showed you and match it, right?
Yeah, love it. Okay, so I'm going to wrap this up because I want to leave more time for talking about this. So let me just run really through and show you where the funny part was that I prefaced at the top. So I started getting a little funnier with it. Should I take a shower today? Just the 4.0 model says, well, that depends. Are you planning to interact with other human beings? If so, they might appreciate it. The other one says, well, it's either that or continue to smell like a science experiment, your call, right? Definitely more of a dig, right? So last but not least here, I asked it about, my mom says I can sing, but my friends say I can't. How do I tell my friends I'm wrong? And it's like, you could try asking them for their opinions or in a more serenading way, or just keep believing your mom. It's less messy, right? I love that answer. It's just kind of like whatever. So here's where it got funny to me. And I'm only using me as a dig. I was going to use one of Carl's, but Carl's not here, and I'm not going to do that without his permission. So I said, hey, in the style of what's been going around and trending, which is this, hey, ChatGPT, roast my Instagram feed, in which case you take a screenshot. This has been trending lately in the last couple of days. You take a screenshot and then ChatGPT will roast. And it's saying stuff like, right here, you can see like whatever this person put it. They had a puppy pic. It says, starting strong with the classic. I need more likes, so here's a puppy. We all see through it, but hey, it works, right? So the same idea. It's roasting their Instagram feed. So this is actually really well timed, because I said, here's my last LinkedIn post. And I said, go ahead and critique it. Now, it already knows it's a sarcastic bot on both ends, because we told it was Marv, give me sarcastic answers. But one is 4.0 and one is obviously trained on just those small examples, 50 examples. So my post was, let me just find it so I can show you really quick. It was the one I just did yesterday. It looks like this. We don't have time to read the whole thing, but it was about a survey that came out, a research report that came out about the top 50 or top 100 Gen AI consumer apps. I was talking about it. I wrote a post about it. Okay. So this is a typical one for me, and I'm naming my apps at the bottom here. And this is what the fine-tune model says. Wow, that's a lot to unpack. First of all, kudos for using punctuation. Almost makes it readable. Your post reads like a stream of consciousness gone rogue, but hey, at least you're consistently inconsistent. Then it goes on to break it down. Clarity. Perhaps trying to organize your thoughts a bit better. It's like you threw all your ideas into the blender and hit puree. Then it says typos in grammar. Gen AI should probably, that one's actually wrong. It wasn't really wrong. It said also, my person top 9 is a phrase that should never have existed, because I actually had a typo in my post. Brevity. This isn't a journal entry. It's LinkedIn. Cut the fluff. A good start would be to remove everything before the real content. That one hurts. Structure. Using headlines, bullet points, or even hieroglyphics. Anything to make it look less like an eyesore. Relevance. Focus on 3 to 5 apps is great advice. Maybe apply it to your writing next time. Remember, your audience is like busy professionals. They don't have all day to decipher your thoughts.
So we're still looking at LinkedIn. Was that 4.0 or Mini?
I'm so sorry. Yes, this is me reading right off of the fine-tune 4.0 Mini. The other side is fine. It kind of pulls it out 4.0, but it really doesn't do a good job. Previously, with the short answers, like the capital of Portugal, whatever, like it did fine. 4.0 on its own did fine. It doesn't even come close to the level of fun sarcasm that this is, like a roast, if you will. So there is a drastic difference, and this is only trained on 50 examples of what I consider to be sarcasm. So this is a great example. If you wanted to create a fun bot through an API, throw it up on a website, and you wanted to call it Roast My LinkedIn, you could do this probably using, if you wanted the coding, go use Claude and Artifacts to get the coding, set up your website, connect the API. And if you wanted people, you'd be paying for it, obviously. But if you wanted your friends to kind of try it out for a few cents a try, they could roast their own LinkedIn post. This could be done within, if I just stopped what I was doing in the next, 2 hours, less than that probably. So just wanted to bring that up. Now, I won't bring any more in. I think I've shared everything I want to share at this point. I've talked a lot. So let me stop now and bring it back to you guys. Because I think that's a fun example. It roasted a few more. I had it roast one of Carl's, but I won't share it. It was in line though. Carl's not here, so I'm not sharing it, but I will share it internally on our Slack channel for sure.
Okay. So one of the things that I want to share 2 use cases that are about being able to capture your own personal voice, and to talk about why it is different than prompting, right? So when we're prompting, we're using words to describe what we want, but we don't know the association that ChatGPT has with those words, with that model, right? We're guessing. And there are what Rob Lennon calls high gravity words. So if you use the word storytelling, it's going to go fiction. You're going to get a ton of stories, which is not what you meant by storytelling, those kinds of things. For me, I have tried to get AI to understand the way I experience the world, which is through, I have synesthesia, right? So I use things like flavor, or I see that thing that I'm hearing, right? Like those are things that happen a lot. When I describe that, the ChatGPT has zero context. Like, nope. I get things like, wow, this experience was like a plum that was, thrown in the ocean and like bounced. And it's like, yeah, no, I see you're going for the feeling things, but that's no, that no one would say that. The other time that I've seen this be really successful was someone who spoke and wrote in German and English, like flipped back and forth, was professional in both languages, and therefore had a particular context to be able to share in either language. And again, prompting didn't do it, fine-tuning did. So like those cases are great. Jyunmi or Andy, do you have when are you using fine-tuning? How are you
So I wanted I just wanted to lay out an example to kind of bookend what we're talking about here. And a lot of times for me, it's easier when I can have relational connections, right? And so, as an example, let's take a specific domain. So, like, let's say legal use, like a legal use case, right? So you can have a model that's trained, right, or built around the U.S. legal system, or fill in the blank there. Okay, that's a trained model. Then you can fine tune that model, right, adjusting its weights and how it reacts and things like that based on your specific domain or a subdomain. So you could make it about constitutional law, or you could do it as a how you want to reference something, right? So let's say a model trained on the U.S. law for lawyers, or trained the model fine-tuned for judges, right? And then that changed the perspective. So that's a good explanation, I think, for fine-tuning. Now we'll talk later on in our episode later in the week about RAG. Now RAG's really good about having organizational reference point, or having that information for a particular organization. So let's say you have your model that's trained on U.S. law, fine-tuned for the use by lawyers, and part of a particular law office, and the information that's specific to that law office, right? And RAG's really good about real time and updating and things like that, so you don't have to refine tune every few days when a new case comes in and things like that. So I think that's the way I like to look at it. It's an easy way to understand what the difference is between a trained model, a fine-tuned model, and then a RAG system as part of the overall model.
Yeah, solid point. It could be a hybrid, right? Like you just said. So an example of the law would be, for this particular example, using the model, we needed to respond in this way every time. It has to have this type of language in it, this type of tone to it, this type of voice to it. That's something you could fine tune right into the model, because you're basically saying, every time I use this prompt, I want it to respond in this format or whatever the case is. But also, I wanted to go and retrieve information from this RAG system, from this data set that I have, based on cases, based on whatever the case it may be. That doesn't necessarily need to be, as you just pointed out, doesn't need to be fine-tuned into the model. But the formatting, that would be something that you might want to do. I would say RFPs would be a good example for this. There is a certain way, or requests for when you're requesting money, and when you're asking for free money from the government to do something, to do a project. Grant writing. Thank you. God, that was right out of my head. Grant writing. There is a certain way to talk and speak when you're doing grant writing. There's a formulaic way of doing that, or being in a master's program and having to write with a certain formulaic way of citations. Hey, you could put that into the model and then have it speak back to you that way every single time, which is really going to reduce the amount of effort you have to put in on the back end. Maybe you can get there with prompting, but you could also fine tuning it, and then you can use a RAG system, as we'll talk more on Thursday for it. So I think it's great that you brought up that, there could be a hybrid solution, and many times there is.
I think you made a good comment there, Brian, about the data being available in the RAG system and the means of delivering that data being something that you want to tune the model to do. And you can do that in prompts today, right? You can provide examples in prompt, and it goes in at the time of inference as context and uses those examples in order to shape its response. But fine-tuning a model is also adding examples to it. And it's no accident that all of the examples that OpenAI is providing are in the JSON-L format, and they are, here's what you are, here's an example of the thing that you're going to look at, and here's this response type that I want you to deliver. And I want 50 of those examples so you can learn from those and use that as a guideline to how you're going to, I'm going to use the word behave when you're accessing data and then responding to the user. So examples, it's been proven over and over, examples are really the way that these large language models get very good, and even small language models get very good at performing for you. And we'll talk about RAG. RAG is generally thought of as something that's a lot easier to implement. And for most companies where you're really not trying to, create a sarcastic thing or some other, unique example, you might want to have it use your brand voice, but what is that after all? Everybody in the company has a different voice. So RAG is really what most companies turn to when they're wanting to possess the large language model with the information that's relevant to their company. So, and the difference is you can just upload all that data and park it in a vector database, and then that's going to be retrieved when it's relevant and added to the response of the bot. Fine-tuning is different. You're really changing the personality of the model through examples.
Yeah. And I mean, so Rainy Equinox is saying in our chat that like the sarcastic bot could join the chat. My thing was like, careful what you wish for. Jen is saying I'm going to get owned if that happens. I don't know if that's a good idea. I literally copied and pasted the chat and I ran it through. I'm not calling out any ideas on here. Let me see if there's one or two I can read. I do not want to hurt anybody's feelings. This is just coming from it. Beth says no, don't do it. Yeah, no. We can ask the chat.
You can, but I want to make sure that this is me as the camp counselor saying, hey, yes, that's funny, and we really want to be a place where if you feel like you don't know who to ask questions about this stuff, ask us questions, right? So with that, go, Brian.
I mean, Seska said we can take it. Jude says go for it. Rainy Equinox says you could do one for me. Okay. So I got approvals. Cisco's question. Finally, someone asking the real questions, although I'm not sure if conceptually understanding is even in the cards here. That was one that came back for there. Rainy Equinox. The potential for a sarcastic bot is high, almost as high as your audience's expectations. What else do we have here?
So is the bot writing what they would write? Let me rewrite what you said, but be more sarcastic.
No, I think it's saying it's using the comments. It says the comment that they made, and it is giving a sarcastic response to it. So it's like a specific comment that I copied in, and it's giving a response to it. There's some other funny ones in here, but they're not for people who said go for it. So I'm not going to do it. Anyway, listen, it's just a fun example of, it's not really, doesn't matter. It's just a fun example of what a fine tuning can do. We've already given you a lot of different ideas on how you can do it. And even more importantly, look how easy that was. I mean, I promise you nothing I did. I went through it quick, I know. But quite literally, if you went to YouTube, I mean, you could watch our show right now, but if you go to YouTube and look at Corbin Brown's, like I showed you, he shows you how to do it. By the way, VS Code is the free download that you can get. I used it. It was free. I think it's made by Microsoft. You quite literally can just copy and paste. He kind of shows you some examples of his YouTube videos, so we don't need to cover that today, but you can do it. I promise you, if you've never even messed around in the dashboard of the playground or fine tuning, you will have no problem doing this with a small data set. If you want to try it, just use the mini and then go in the playground and use the compare, which is a great feature. So you can see on the left what it would have typically said with just that prompt, and on the right, what your new fine tuned would be. You don't have to do sarcasm. It could be whatever use case you want, but go for it. It's super easy to do. You're getting some free credits. And so it shouldn't be something that's costing you necessarily to try, and see what you get. It might be fun just to see what you get. Obviously, we're going to tell you to circle back to good prompt engineering, prompt chaining, using function calling, all these kind of things. Yes to all of that. Okay, anything left for you guys before we wrap this up?
If you do it, let us know.
Yeah, for sure.
TheDailyAIShow.com. We totally want to know what happened when you did it.
I will, for all the people listening to this, I will say this. If you want to see more roasts of my LinkedIn posts and anybody else on the show who approves of it, I will put some of those in the newsletter that will go out on Sunday. So there's your reasoning for why you should go sign up for the newsletter if you haven't already, where it's a growing list. It comes out every Sunday. We always share things that are beyond the show. This is a good example of that. If you want to see me get roasted by this sarcasm bot, I only shared one of them. The other ones are a little bit rougher. So if you want to see that, go to thedailyishow.com, sign up for our newsletter. There's a lot of other great stuff in it too, not just me getting roasted by a chatbot, but there's your good reason for maybe signing up this week and seeing it. Like we said, we got the news tomorrow. Thursday, we're going to be talking about RAG systems. And Friday, we're going to be circling back to ChatGPT a little bit and OpenAI, talking about GPT actions. And have they come around? What does their cookbook look like? We've seen Claude and Anthropic put out cookbooks. GPT Actions has a cookbook. Is it any good? We're going to talk about that and give our honest review as we always do. We're not being sponsored by anybody. OpenAI isn't sponsoring us. Big shock. And we'll give you our honest reviews on that on Friday. So that's everything for today. Thanks for hanging out with us. And we will see you guys tomorrow. Thanks for all the fun comments. This is a good one. Bye.
Aloha.